Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one. Marcus Aurelius. We spend so much time trying to be someone in the eyes of others, to be recognized, admired, remembered. But what about the moments when no one is watching, no audience, no rewards? Who are you when no one sees? When no one knows you got up at 5 a.m.? When no one applauds you for doing the hardest right thing? When every kind word you speak goes unnoticed? In those moments, do you still live by your principles? Or do you only try when someone is looking? This is not a video about how to beat others. It's about how to conquer yourself quietly, steadily, and completely. 12 Stoic principles. Not to become someone admired, but to become someone you can respect every day in the smallest acts. If you've ever asked yourself, how do I live well? Not when everything goes right, but when no one sees me trying. Stay. Stoic App will walk that path with you, starting now. 1. Focus on what you can control. What are you worried about today? And how much of it is really in your hands? I once knew a man. Every morning, he would wake up and, before even brushing his teeth, check his phone. Global news, stock prices, engagement on yesterday's post, unread messages from clients, someone's cold attitude from the day before. His entire day, whether it would be good or bad, didn't depend on himself, but on things beyond his reach. What he forgot to check each morning wasn't the market, it was himself. That man was you, was me, was all of us. We live in a noisy world, but the feeling of chaos doesn't come from the world. It comes from trying to control things that were never ours. Other people's reactions, the weather, politics, the market, the outcome of an effort. Those things, though they affect us, are never ours to command, and clinging to what isn't ours, that is the root of anxiety. A Stoic is not someone who ignores the world. They simply draw a clear line. What is their task, and what belongs to God, to time, or to others? Epictetus, the slave who became a philosopher, once said, "Some things are up to us, and some things are not." His entire philosophy and his entire life is proof of that truth. Tim Ferriss, author of The 4-Hour Workweek, followed by millions for his productivity and life philosophy, once found himself trapped in a state of mental chaos. He shared that each day of his used to be controlled by his inbox. He checked emails constantly, reacted on impulse, got swept up by requests, expectations, and the invisible comparisons of others, until he realized one simple but profound truth. If I can't control my inbox, then I can't control my life. That line wasn't just a productivity tip, it was a wake-up call. If you can't master the smallest thing that belongs to you, everything bigger will slip through your fingers like dust. And the strange thing is, when we stop trying to control everything, we start to truly gain control over our lives. Not because we've become stronger, but because we've stopped scattering our energy. Instead of fighting the wind, we adjust our sails. Instead of complaining about the rain, we start building a house. Happiness, for a Stoic, doesn't come from everything going smoothly. It comes from how we choose to respond to whatever comes our way. So how do you start living like that? Each morning, write down 3 things that are making you anxious. Then look at each one and ask, is this within my control? If not, cross it out, gently but firmly. That is not avoidance, It is the beginning of freedom. And every time you want to react to something, a look, a headline, a harsh word, pause and ask, is this mine to carry? Because every moment you spend fighting what's beyond your reach is a moment you give up the only thing you truly own: your will, your actions, and your character. And the final question for you today is this: will you pour your energy into what you can control, or let yourself be dragged by what was never yours? 2. Measure your worth by effort, not outcome. Have you ever felt worthless just because something didn't work out? A failed interview, a rejected project, a dream that once felt within reach, suddenly slipping away. And then you're not just disappointed, you start doubting yourself. Maybe I'm just not good enough. I once knew a student, graduated with honors, an impressive track record. During college, he studied seriously, joined research projects, built his skills, did internships. Everyone believed he'd easily land a job at his dream company, a prestigious global firm. But he failed. Not once, but 3 times. He couldn't understand it. He had worked so hard. He didn't do anything wrong. So why? He started withdrawing, stopped talking about failure, stopped sending out applications, not because he lost opportunity, but because he started believing he failed, because he wasn't worthy. But there's something he didn't realize. His worth wasn't tied to a job offer. It was built during all those years of disciplined study, persistence, and personal growth. What truly mattered wasn't the name of a company printed on his CV, but the inner strength forged through small steps, and every time he stood back up after disappointment. Modern society teaches us to tie our self-worth to achievements, titles, income, numbers. But Stoicism teaches the opposite. You cannot control the outcome. You can only control your effort. And that's what defines who you are. Marcus Aurelius once said, "Right action is its own reward." And legendary coach John Wooden defined success as peace of mind, knowing you did your best. The truly grounded are not those who always succeed. They are the ones who, even in failure, never lose self-respect, because they know nothing is more worthy of pride than having lived, acted, and loved with all you had. That student, after 3 failed attempts at his dream company, almost gave up. But one day, while editing his resume to try one more time, he got an email. It was from a mentor who once guided him during a second-year internship, someone he had asked to learn from, even though the job was unpaid and unnoticed. That mentor was inviting him to interview for a new position, not the role he once dreamed of, but one that fit who he had become. And he got the job, not because of a lucky break, but because of an old effort he thought had been forgotten. Turns out, no effort disappears. They quietly build a path, one we'll step onto when we're ready. Your worth doesn't lie in the result, because results always contain factors beyond your control. Timing, other people's reactions, invisible bias. But effort is different. It is a choice, a commitment, a silent promise you make to yourself each day. I won't give up. I will live by who I am. So how do you live that way? Not just when things go right, but also when they don't. Each night, don't ask, "What did I achieve?" Ask, "Did I live fully in what I did today?" Don't set goals like, "I must reach 10,000 followers." Set, "I will share what I believe every day." Don't let others define you by outcome. Define yourself by action, because what makes you worthy was never the finish line, but how you ran each step, even when no one was watching. And if one day you feel your efforts are still invisible, still silent, remember, the doors truly meant for you don't usually open because you were standing there at the right time, but because, once, you knocked on someone's heart with a quiet persistence, even you forgot. And today, I leave you with this question. If tomorrow you fail, but today you gave your all, can you still be proud of yourself? 3. Accepting your flaws and mistakes. Is there something about yourself you've always tried to hide? Not because you don't want to change, but because you're afraid people will see you differently, afraid you won't be loved, afraid you won't be worthy. I think of Naomi Osaka, the former world #1 tennis player who won multiple Grand Slam titles at a young age. And yet, at the peak of her career, she shocked the sports world by withdrawing from the 2021 Roland Garros tournament, refusing to attend press conferences, and publicly admitting she was struggling with mental health, anxiety, and depression. She didn't hide. She didn't blame. She simply said, "I need to take care of my mental health." And despite criticism, fines, even doubt, Osaka stood by her choice, not because she was weak, but because she had the courage to stop and face herself. Stoicism has never asked you to be perfect. It asks you to be honest, to face the truth, to have the courage to confront yourself, even when that means admitting, "I was wrong. I'm not whole. I've hurt others. I haven't always lived by what I believe." Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher-emperor, once wrote in Meditations, "Look things in the face. Don't add. Don't subtract." He didn't write to impress. He wrote to examine himself, to guard against self-deception, to keep moving from a place of truth. Seneca also admitted, "No wise person has ever lived without making mistakes." For the Stoic, wisdom doesn't come from never falling, but from rising and learning every time you do. We often think denying our flaws is the way to stay good enough, but that denial is what makes us fragile, because when we can't face what's broken, we lose the power to repair it. But when we name our mistakes, without excuses, without blame, we begin to truly own our lives. You can't heal a wound by pretending it doesn't exist, and you can't grow if you believe you're already perfect. So how do you begin the journey of facing yourself without drowning in guilt? Try this small practice. Write down the 3 mistakes you've been most ashamed of, not to punish yourself, but to ask, "What can I learn from this?" And once a week, create a space called the Stoic Confession, where you honestly reflect on the past week and write down what you didn't do right, not to judge, but to understand yourself more deeply. We're not loved because we're perfect. We're loved because we're brave, brave enough to make things right, brave enough to live true, even after we've lost our way. And sometimes, the thing you're trying hardest to hide is exactly what could touch someone else the deepest. So if today you're carrying something heavy, a mistake not yet forgiven, a part of yourself you haven't accepted, pause and ask, what am I trying to hide when it could be the beginning of my real strength? If this video touched something in you, something you once hid, once felt ashamed of, once tried to forget, share your thoughts in the comments. You don't need to explain everything. Just write, "I'm learning to accept." That sentence might be the first step toward a strength you didn't know you had. And if you know someone else who's struggling with themselves, send them this video, not to fix them, but so they know they're not alone. Fourth, do it with your whole heart. Focus and consistency. What you're doing today, does it deserve your full heart and mind? How many things in your life have you done as if they were the last thing you'd ever get to do? I once met a teacher. He had taught at a small high school for 30 years. Every lesson he prepared as if writing the most important message in the world. He remembered every student's name, noticed even the distant gaze or soft sigh of each one. Despite the low salary, despite never appearing on television, he showed up every day with a heart that never dimmed. Years later, I met his former students. They had become doctors, engineers, screenwriters. None of them remembered all the lessons, but they all remembered one thing. That teacher was the first person who believed in them, listened to them, and lived as if nothing mattered more than being present in class that day. And that, his steady and wholehearted presence, changed the course of dozens of lives. We often think that only big things are worth our full effort. But the Stoic understands, no act is small if you bring your full heart to it. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Do every act of your life as if it were the very last." And he wasn't writing to kings, he was writing to himself in the days of plagues, wars, and silent fatigue of the mind. Just like Benjamin Zander, conductor of the Boston Philharmonic, who once said, "They don't need me just to wave the baton. They need me to be fully present, to bring life into every note." With just a gesture, a look, he transmitted something the audience didn't just hear, they felt it. And that's what turned a concert into a ritual, not just a performance. And have you ever done something just to get it over with, only to realize you can't even remember how you showed up? Doing something with your whole heart doesn't mean overworking. It means presence, showing up, living fully. It means turning off distractions, putting the phone down, taking a deep breath, and asking, how much of myself am I bringing to this? It means focusing on one thing, just one, and doing it with respect for your own time, because no moment will ever come back. And if today were the last time you could do this, would you do it differently? You don't need a big title to make an impact. You only need to be fully present in what you're doing. Because sometimes a sincere email, a genuine check-in, a piece of writing crafted with full attention might quietly reach someone, making their world feel a little lighter. And you might be healed in the process too. So from today on, don't just get things done. Live fully in what you do, not for others, but because it's how you train yourself, little by little, into a person of depth, dignity, and presence. And if one day you feel invisible in this noisy world, remember, no one can truly see you if you're not fully present in what you do. 5. Constantly renew. Adapt, don't cling. What are you still clinging to? Just because you once believed it was right? An old way of working, a dream that no longer fits, a belief that's become outdated, yet you still hold on to, simply because it's been with you for so long. Stoicism doesn't teach us to live harshly. It teaches us to live in alignment with the ever-changing nature of the universe. Everything changes, and those who resist change will be swallowed by it. The story of Blockbuster is one of the clearest examples of that truth. In the early 2000s, Netflix, back then just a DVD rental company by mail, offered to partner with Blockbuster, the most powerful player in the movie rental industry. But Blockbuster declined. They believed customers would always prefer visiting stores, choosing tapes, enjoying that in-person experience. They saw change as a threat, not a step forward. Meanwhile, Netflix embraced change. They gradually phased out the old model and moved toward online streaming. They didn't betray their core value. They simply changed how they delivered it, bringing the fastest, most convenient experience to viewers. And what happened? Netflix became a global empire. Blockbuster, once with thousands of stores, now has just one remaining location, like a historical monument. Not because they weren't big enough, but because they weren't flexible enough. Between determination and stubbornness, the line is so thin that many people don't even notice it. We think we're staying true to our principles, but sometimes we're just afraid to admit that what once worked no longer fits the present. A Stoic never lets go of their values, but they are always willing to change their actions. Epictetus once said, "If you want to improve, be prepared to change completely." Marcus Aurelius wrote, "All things are in motion. Whoever resists that flow destroys themselves." So, how do you begin to renew? Don't just look inward, look outward. Let your eyes observe those who are doing things differently. Listen to your customers, your partners, even those who once walked away. Every signal from the world, if you are calm enough to hear it, is an invitation to renew. Ask yourself, who's doing this better than me and why? Which of my values needs a new form in order to stay alive? Remember, rigidity often hides behind the mask of loyalty to principles. But if you truly love what you do, you won't let it drown just because you're afraid to change its shape. So start questioning everything you're holding on to. Do I keep this because it's still right, or because I'm afraid to admit it's become outdated? Once a month, take time to review how you work, how you love, how you respond. What needs to be refreshed? What are you continuing? Not because it still has value, but simply because you're used to it. Renewal is not betrayal. It's a more honest way of living with the present. And sometimes, to protect your essence, you have to be willing to change your form. 6. Gratitude. Each day is a gift. If today were the last time you ever woke up, what would you miss the most? It probably wouldn't be something grand, but maybe just a sliver of light slipping through the curtain, a touch you never said thank you for, a very small moment you once thought was ordinary. I once knew a man who lived in a rush. Every day he chased new goals, working non-stop. He always said, "When I have time, I'll visit my mother longer. When I'm free, I'll sit and watch the sunset." But that when never came, until an accident took away his vision. And what he regretted most wasn't that he couldn't see anymore, but that he once could and never felt grateful. Light, color, the faces of his loved ones, things that showed up every day, and yet he never named them. Gratitude doesn't require a perfect life. It only requires your presence. In today's world, we often think gratitude is something you feel after receiving something big, but the Stoic believes the opposite. Life itself is already a gift, and every breath you take is a debt owed to existence. Marcus Aurelius once reminded, "When you wake, think, I am alive. I can see, hear, think. That is a miracle." And Seneca, who wrote his final letters with calm acceptance, said, "The wise man lives as if each day is a gift granted anew." End of chapter. The problem is, we often wait for something extraordinary to feel grateful. A surprise gift, a rare vacation. But while we wait for something grand, we miss hundreds of little things happening right now. The warmth of morning coffee, a message from a friend, a laugh overheard in a cafe, a quiet hug from someone you love. These things might not be here tomorrow. So how do you practice gratitude, not as a passing emotion, but as a way of living? Start each morning with a simple habit. Write down 3 things you're grateful for, even if they seem too small to name. I heard birds singing. I can still walk. I had breakfast with someone I love. And each night, before sleeping, ask yourself, what made me smile today? Even if it was just a glance, a sentence, or a silent moment alone. And when you pass by a waiter, don't hesitate to look them in the eye and say thank you. When your father carries your bag, even if it's nothing big, acknowledge it. These moments don't waste your time. They wake you up, because that awakening is the key to living deeply, slowly, and meaningfully. And if one day you feel tired, like life is just repeating itself, remember those who have lost the ability to touch, to see, or to speak. For them, what you have right now is a miracle, and you get to choose to treat it as ordinary or to see it as a gift. So today, I leave you with one question. If tomorrow morning you lost something you have today, what do you wish you had appreciated more? 7. The art of saying no, to live true to yourself. Every time you say yes out of fear of saying no, you're saying no to yourself. We've all been there, reluctantly agreeing to go out when we're exhausted, taking on more work when we're already overwhelmed, bending to others' wishes while quietly suffocating inside. But you know, kindness without boundaries becomes unintentional self-sacrifice. I once met a man, successful, kind, well-liked by many, but he was constantly exhausted. His phone never stopped ringing. His schedule had no empty space. The meetings no longer brought him joy. He said, "I thought I was living well, but I realized I've never really lived my life." Because he didn't know how to say no, he slowly lost himself in his own kindness. And that boundless generosity, in the end, became a form of cruelty toward himself. Stoicism doesn't teach selfishness. It teaches limits. It teaches that virtue isn't found in doing everything, but in choosing what truly matters. Epictetus warned, "Don't trade what is noble for what is trivial." Every time you say no to what doesn't matter, you protect what does. Every time you reject what doesn't align, you preserve your integrity. Steve Jobs, the founder of Apple, embodied this philosophy. He once said, "People think focus means saying yes to what you want to do, but that's not it. Focus is saying no to 100 other good ideas." In 1997, when he returned to Apple, he cut over 70% of the products in development, not because they were bad, but because he knew chasing everything would cost Apple its identity. He didn't live to please everyone. He lived to honor a vision and protected the creative space like something sacred. Greatness, sometimes, is born in a single, firm no. So how do you start practicing the art of saying no? Before every invitation, pause for a breath and ask, does this truly align with my values and goals? If not, learn to say no gently, firmly, without over-explaining. A short, clear no carries far more strength than a reluctant yes. Learning to say no isn't about becoming cold. It's about preserving space for what truly deserves to live. No one can do everything, walk every path, live every life. But you can, and should, live the one life you truly own, your own. If this chapter made you pause for a moment of reflection, share it with someone who needs to learn how to say no without guilt. You might help them keep a part of themselves. And if you're on a journey to live by your inner values, stay with Stoic App. We're here, not to tell you how to live, but to walk with you as you listen inward, one moment at a time. 8. Letting go with calm. What are you still holding on to that is quietly hurting you more each day? We hold tight because we believe that letting go means losing something important. But have you ever thought, maybe the thing you're clinging to is exactly what's holding you back? I once heard a story about an old carpenter. He had worked with great care all his life, but there was one house, the last one he built before retiring, that he constructed carelessly. He was exhausted, ready to be done. What he didn't expect was that very house, once finished, was gifted back to him as a farewell present from his employer. And so, he had to live inside the very mistake he had made. For years, he lived in quiet regret. Every crack in the wall, every stuck door, was a silent reminder of the one time he let go of his own standard. But then one day, he began to fix it, little by little, brick by brick, stroke by stroke, not to erase the mistake, but to make peace with it, because he understood the past cannot be changed, but he could choose how to live forward without nesting in an old wound. Letting go, in Stoic thought, is not surrender. It is not denying the value of what once was. Letting go is an act of courage, the willingness to accept that not everything still belongs to the present. The strength to admit that some things, no matter how beautiful they once were, have finished their part in our story. Epictetus once said, "Don't cling to what doesn't belong to you." And Marcus Aurelius, an emperor surrounded by endless duty, wrote with surprising gentleness, "Leave when the work is done, gently, without regret." Because true calm doesn't come from having everything. It comes from knowing when to release, to make room for what's next. So how do you practice this? In a world that keeps telling you to hold on, fight harder, never give up. Start simply. Each week, choose one thing to release. An object you no longer need. A negative emotion you've held too long. An expectation that no longer reflects who you are now. Write down what you're still gripping and ask yourself, does this still nourish me? Or is it quietly draining my life energy each day? Letting go doesn't require you to feel light right away. It only asks for the courage to loosen your grip, and the lightness will follow. Like the old carpenter, we don't need to deny mistakes or suppress sadness. We only need to stop letting them drive our lives. Because if you don't let go, your hands won't be free to hold what's next. If you don't leave, you can't truly arrive. 9. Stay humble. The more successful you are, the more you listen. There are people who, once successful, believe they can no longer be wrong. They stop listening to others, and more dangerously, stop listening to themselves. But Stoic philosophy reminds us, the higher you climb, the more you must look down at your feet to remember you're still only human. I once knew a young founder who brought his company to the top in just 3 years. Talented, decisive, praised by many. But the praise began to deafen him. He started seeing every piece of feedback as obstruction, rejected all suggestions, and clung tightly to his own views. Soon, the product became outdated, the team started leaving, and the company spiraled. Not because he lacked talent, but because he stopped learning. He thought he had arrived, when in truth, growth is a journey with no finish line. Howard Schultz, former CEO of Starbucks, is living proof of the opposite. When he returned to lead Starbucks in 2008, a time when the company was on the brink of crisis, he didn't assert power. He started with something surprisingly humble, visiting hundreds of stores across the US, talking to baristas, to managers, to customers, and taking note of every small detail, not to command, but to listen. Schultz even decided to shut down every Starbucks location for one evening, so the entire staff could be retrained in the art of brewing. Not because they were doing it wrong, but because he wanted everyone to return to the brand's original core, quality, and respect for the smallest details. When asked by the media why he did something so unusual, he simply said, "I didn't return to command, I returned to listen." And it was precisely through that humility that Starbucks not only recovered financially, but also revived the culture that once made it a legend. The Stoic does not see humility as weakness. They see it as the foundation of wisdom. Epictetus taught, "If you want to learn, don't think you already know." And Marcus Aurelius, though an emperor, wrote in his journal every day like a student learning how to live, because they understood arrogance is a slippery slope into ruin. Only those who keep a learning mind keep growing. So how do you remain humble as you continue to rise? Each night, write a single line of reflection. Where was I wrong today? Not to self-blame, but to keep your heart open to learning. When facing a major decision, ask someone, "If you were me, what would you do differently?" That question doesn't make you weak, it makes you stronger, because you're not trading truth for the illusion of being right. Humility doesn't reduce your worth, it increases your capacity to grow. And the more successful you become, the more you should remember. The feedback that's hardest to hear is often the one you need the most. 10. Focus on action, not on praise or criticism. If you live for praise, you can also die from criticism. It may sound extreme, but think about it. How many times have you changed the way you speak, dress, or express yourself just because of a few casual comments? How many times have you prepared to share something you believe in, only to delete it, afraid no one would engage? I once knew an artist. His early works, raw but full of fire, because he created because he had to. He wrote like he was breathing, painted like he was alive. But slowly, he began reading comments. And then, he began living by them. One like lifted his whole day. One criticism shut down his entire spirit. He no longer created for love, but out of fear of being forgotten. And in that moment, his art lost its soul. That's what Stoicism warned against thousands of years ago. If you place your self-worth in the hands of others, you've already given them control over your peace. Marcus Aurelius, an emperor who endured many lonely days under judgment, once reminded, "Do not let praise or criticism distract you from the path. The weak live by reaction, the strong live by principle. The one who chases applause will always have to perform." But the one who pursues value can act in silence and still remain powerful. In the age of social media, this truth becomes even more real. You can get caught in the cycle of praise, criticism, going viral, going silent, and then scrambling to get noticed again. But pause and ask, is this thing I'm doing truly right for me, or am I just trying to match others' taste? A post, a project, a decision, if not built from inner clarity, will always tremble in the face of a few comments. So how do you stay grounded? Start with one small habit. Before every action, a post, a reply, a decision, pause and ask, is this right or just popular? If it's right, do it. Even if no one sees, even if no one responds, even if you have to walk alone, because the greatest values are often built from the quietest steps. Live and work as if no one is watching. Not because you don't care, but because you've chosen not to live through other people's gaze. A song never released, but that made you tremble when writing it. A letter never sent, but that helped you breathe. A right thing done, without thanks, still carries meaning. The artist in the story, after a long period of feeling lost, quietly stepped away from social media. He made no announcement, didn't disappear, just quietly returned to his studio and wrote an album no one knew about. But it was the most profound album he had ever created. And that very album, later, became the spark that inspired other artists to walk away from fame addiction and return to real art. You don't need to be famous to have value. You don't need to be liked to live truthfully. Whether what you do is right doesn't depend on applause. It depends on whether you truly put your heart into it. If this chapter made you pause and look inward, share it with someone who's also living in the noise of expectations and judgment. And if you want to keep walking with us on the path of living by values, not by opinions, subscribe to Stoic App and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next chapters. 11. Accept and learn from failure. You don't fail because you fall. You fail when you don't get up carrying the lesson. We can't avoid falling, but what defines you is not the fall itself, it's how you rise afterward. I once read about a British track athlete, Derek Redmond. In 1992, at the Barcelona Olympics, he was expected to medal, but just seconds into the semi-final, his hamstring tore, pain. The whole stadium went silent. Everyone thought he would leave on a stretcher, but Derek stood up, limping, pushing away those who rushed in to help. He didn't want to finish the race with assistance, but on the very legs that had failed him. And step by step, he kept going, not to win, but because he refused to quit. The crowd stood, clapped, wept. That moment, to this day, remains one of the most moving scenes in Olympic history. But the story didn't end there. Derek never returned to the Olympics. He never won a medal. But he didn't live as a failure. He became a speaker, an entrepreneur, and a source of inspiration to millions, because he understood one thing: failure, if we're willing to learn, is always a beginning. And perhaps, if Marcus or Epictetus had been there that day, they would have smiled, seeing Stoicism lived out in action. Stoicism doesn't sugarcoat failure. They face it, like a strict but fair teacher. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Failure is only an opinion. You can change it at any time." Epictetus emphasized, "Every hardship is a test for the mind, not a punishment." The weak blame, The strong face it. They don't fear failure. They fear walking away from it having learned nothing. As Eastern wisdom often says, failure is the mother of success. Every door that closes, if you have the courage to rise and learn, opens another one, welcoming a stronger version of you. So what we should fear is not failure, but missing the chance to grow from it. And the strange thing is, once you start learning from failure, you stop fearing it. Because you know, every wound carries a lesson. Every disappointment is a chance to step back, reflect, and adjust your course. The Stoic doesn't wish to be spared from pain. They only wish to have the courage not to waste it. So, how do you start living this way? Every time you fail, whether it's a conversation gone wrong, a poor decision, or a collapsed project, write down 3 things you learned, and 1 thing you'll do differently next time. See failure as a teacher, no judgment, no shame, just learning. And if there's an old failure you still haven't forgiven yourself for, go back to it. This time, instead of blaming, ask, if I were the teacher, what's the lesson here? You don't define your life by the times you win. You define it by how you return after every loss. And sometimes, that very failure becomes the quiet foundation for the most lasting victory to come. 12. Live with virtue when no one is watching. True dignity is what you still hold, even when no one sees. Not when you're on stage, under the applause, but when you're alone in the dark, facing choices no one notices, no one scores. That's where real virtue begins. I once read about a man who worked as a cleaner in a small museum. Every night, after all the visitors had left, he made one final round, gently wiping each picture frame, each dusty corner beneath the statues. There were rainy days with no guests, weeks when no one paid attention. But every night he cleaned as if he were caring for treasure. Once the manager asked, "You don't need to be that thorough, no one checks." He just smiled and said, "If I do something, it has to be done right, even if no one knows." Stoicism sees virtue as the ultimate measure of a life, not success, not fame, but the strength to hold to what's right, even when no one is watching. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Do what is right, the rest leave to nature," because reputation can be granted, then taken. Money can come, then vanish. But dignity is the only thing you carry to the end, and it's the only thing no one can take from you unless you give it up yourself. Living with virtue is not a philosophy to show off. It's a silent discipline in the smallest things. Returning extra change, arriving on time, keeping a promise when no one's checking. It's when you put your phone down to truly listen to someone. It's when you tell the truth, even when it's hard. It's when you stay firm, even when no one is cheering. It's when you walk away from a small gain to preserve a greater principle. And remember, virtue doesn't mean never being wrong. It means having the courage to make it right. No blame, no hiding, no decoration. A person who lives with virtue doesn't need to prove anything, because they are the proof. If you want to live that way, start with one simple question. If no one saw me, would I still do this? And each night before you sleep, ask one more. Did I live true to what I believe today? You don't need anyone's approval. You just need peace with the one person who will walk with you for life, yourself. And if one day Every certificate, award, or fame you've ever earned is erased. What will remain inside you? If the answer is virtue, then you've lived a life that cannot be taken away. And today, I leave you with one question. If there were only one thing left for you to hold your head high, what do you want it to be? Maybe no one will see the moments you chose to do what's right when it was easier to do wrong. No one will know you turned down an invitation just to keep a promise to yourself. No one will count how many times you got back up after failure or quietly started over when everyone else had walked away. But it's exactly those silent moments where character is forged, where your identity is defined, not by fame, not by outcome. Virtue needs no spotlight because it's the one part of this life you truly own. And if today you're standing between choices, torn between the easy thing and the right thing, between applause and truth, remember, you're not alone on the path of living from the inside out. Stoic App is here, not to teach you how to be great, but to remind you how to live kindly, even when no one's watching. If you're ready to keep going, I'll be here every week with lessons to help you return to what matters most, yourself.